Hello everybody and welcome back to Skyblock News. I'm your host Derailious, and today we're going to be going over changes on the Alpha network related to the Crimson Isle. Notably, this includes a bunch of revamps to pretty much all of the Kuudra armor, so without further ado, let's launch right into it. So, starting off, we have Crimson Armor, and they state that Crimson Armor has been a significant issue where the swipe damage hits for far too much. And basically with this rework, the expected swipe damage will be much less than before. By making this change, they hope that exploits that allow you to one-tap enemies will cease to exist due to swipe damage being much more controlled. And from a balancing perspective, it doesn't make much sense for an armor set to buff your damage by that much either. It means any other armor set would have to be inflated in terms of its damage values in order to compete with Crimson Armor as an alternative. Hey guys, before we continue, I just want to say, if you are interested in supporting the channel at all, please make sure to use code RAIL on the Hypixel store for 5% off your order. It really does help out the channel a lot, and it's the best way you can support me, so if you're interested in picking up any of the future fire sales, make sure to do that. Without any further ado though, let's get back to the video. Alright, take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because Heatran's already responded with some changes that they want to make, potentially, to the way that Crimson Swipe is going to work, but the damage works as followed. Basically, how this works is that your damage swipe is equal to your input damage times your swipe strength divided by your input multiplier. The input damage is just the damage that you're dealing to a mob. The swipe strength is a multiplier that's on the armor. It scales from being at 1 multiplied at basic tier to 2 at infernal tier, incrementing by 0.25x between each tier. And the input multiplier is your additive damage bonuses, things like the warrior perk from your combat skill, damage boosting enchantments, and golden dragon. So if your additive damage bonus is 530%, your multiplier is 5.3x. Basically what this means is that this is effectively soft capped in terms of the amount of damage that Crimson Swipe can deal. And the TLDR is that right now it deals between 15 and 25% of your melee damage currently. What this means is, frankly, that it's not very strong. And if you scroll up at the top of the post now, there is this new section from Heatran, right here. Thanks for the feedback. I'm currently looking into buffing the damage from Crimson Armor's swipe and some related Crimson Swipe changes. That's step 1. The current goal is the changes don't impact your gameplay much for use cases of Crimson Armor, so do let us know how the changes feel when they get rolled to the alpha later. With Crimson Swipe's damage being buffed, we can look into buffing the damage of Terror Armor, as there is a soft balancing idea of the damage bonuses from the armors being relatively close to one another. So what that means is that there's going to be a buff for Terror as well, very cool. They're going to be looking into stack gain, so, they can also buff the damage of the arrows. Pretty nice. Aurora Armor is a little bit more complicated. It's probably impractical for anyone to do Kuudra, even the earlier tiers, without getting carried by a Wither Impact user, but they do intend for at least the lower tiers of Kuudra to be accessible to players at an earlier game stage, and will make changes in the near future, Lord knows when that will be, to address that. They're also looking at buffing the missile damage at higher tiers. I thought the missile damage was fine. We're getting into that in a little bit, but I thought that was totally fine. The design intention here, though, is that they didn't want to buff Mage even more given its current state. Don't blame them. That's completely fine. Eventually, combat will be revamped. Yeah, that's another thing that's going to be happening. TLDR, though, they want to make things fair. They want to make things balanced. And if you want to have your input, seen by the team, feel free to comment on this thread. Very clearly they are taking feedback into account. So head in the description and go check that out if you haven't already. In terms of other changes, at least for right now, they're nerfing the health of pretty much all the blazes in the Smoldering Tomb, at least the ones not directly related to Blaze Slayer. The Smoldering blazes go from 5.5 million HP to 4 million, and the Millennia Age blaze goes from 30 to 20, which is totally fine by me. The TLDR in terms of what they originally said is that they felt like there weren't many existing use cases of Crimson Armor due to a lack of non-instanced applicable content in the game, but they do want to change that in the future, so that means we're going to get new combat content in the future. Lord knows when that will be, once again. For Terror Armor, they have 2 issues that they want to try to address. The Terror Armor itself offered a substantial DPS boost at base tier due to 2 bonus arrows, and the stack game was so comically quick that it might as well have not existed at all. So basically last week they made a patch where effectively it basically gained stacks way slower, and they also nerfed it by quite a bit. But the end result was that Burning and Fiery Armor were now shooting kind of weirdly with only 1 bonus arrow, so they're making some adjustments as to how the tiers work. And as you can see, at all tiers, you get 2 extra arrows, which is pretty cool, and those damage bumps go higher and higher as you get through the tiers. So now it's 10 damage per stack at Infernal, 3 arrow speed per stack, or 3%, and you also shoot 2 extra arrows at 10 stacks to deal 40% arrow damage. In terms of expected damage at Infernal Tier, you can expect your DPS to be increased by 27% while using the Terminator, putting it somewhat in line with Crimson Swipe. I think this is after the nerf last week. So they nerfed it by like 40%, I think, and then they buffed it by 27%. That is not enough to get it back to where it originally was, I believe. But if they're going to be buffing Crimson like they said earlier, they might be buffing this even more. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. They've also made a change here that I really like, so don't get too upset if this seems like a nerf. They've decreased the amount of hits required for Kuudra's hit phase by 20%, and they decreased the amount of damage required to kill Kuudra's final phase by 25%. Totally fine. At that point, I don't even care. You know, initially the complaint was, oh, why are they nerfing my Terminator? They also nerfed Kuudra. They made it easier, rather. That's totally fine by me. Next up, we have Aurora Armor. It is now equipped with launchable missiles that target enemies. They are aware that the missiles were underwhelming, both due to them not properly scaling with any damage bonuses and having a low base damage overall. So they've fixed kind of the scaling, so at 4 out of 4 pieces, you get a stack every 0.5 seconds. What that means is, effectively, every 5 seconds, you're able to launch these little missiles. They've been adjusted to have a base damage of 4,000 for all set tiers, and the ability damage scaling is 0.3. That may sound like it's terrible, but it's actually not that bad. I think in regular combat it was doing like 400k damage per missile. You have 5 missiles, that's 2 mil damage right there. If you're getting them every 5 seconds, in addition to magic damage already being really good, it's not bad at all. Basically what this means is that Aurora is going to be useful at an earlier stage, but a lot less impactful for overall DPS when you have strong weapons with Wither Impact. Higher tiers of Aurora will still fire more missiles than lower tiers, thus dealing more damage than their lower tier counterparts. So that's at Infernal, it shoots 5 missiles. I imagine for each tier down below that, it shoots 1 less. They've made some changes to Crimson Isle mob spawning. Obviously, they've also done all of the unsoul binding that was in the previous update with this one. And they've also made some other changes here. They fixed the Hollow Wands Ichor pool, dealing 20% more damage, or increasing your damage by 20%. It's now 1.2x multiplicative. They fixed the Hollow Wands Raging Wind, increasing damage by literally plus 30 damage to your hit. It is now 30% additive. That is kind of ridiculous. They made Aurora and Fervor now activate on Sneak, which is fine. The activation patterns for Hollow Wand abilities have been shortened to 2 inputs instead of 3. The Diamond Magmafish reward for Diamond Trophy Hunter is now retroactively claimable. Tentacle Meat has been added to the Hell Wisp loot pool, and they buffed the amount of red sand and mycelium in lava fishing loot pool due to those materials being much easier to obtain. In terms of relevant questions, will attribute shards be put on the Bazaar? They do intend to add them to the Bazaar, but it's not a quick thing to change, as basically implementing Bazaar functionality is a very difficult thing to do. They need to do a lot of testing, make sure no issues arise. It's on the short list of things they want to do, but will likely take quite a bit to implement. Kuudra Croceus. Another planned feature they want to implement, once again, extensive development time, a lot of resources, a lot of testing. They want to make sure no issues arise. Aurora Staff is kind of silly right now. Basically, they want to make it so you could do the exact same functionality as before the update by just holding the Aurora Staff itself. This change may not make the update, but will be implemented in the near future. Blaze Tech Ham Radio got nerfed. At least it got nerfed last week, kind of, on the alpha. They basically buffed its stats by a lot, but made it only apply on the Crimson Isle. The TLDR with what they say here is that they don't want to create a situation where players need to have items in their inventory at all times in order to get combat buffs, because that's kind of like what accessories are for already. And the stats of the Blaze Tech Ham Radio are already high. They can't convert it into an accessory because it's already been museumified. It'd just be wacky. They are open, however, to lowering the amount of crafting materials you need in order to make it, which is totally fine by me. Generally, I think this is fine. I like the new Blaze Tech Ham Radio. I bought one a little while back. I don't care that they're going to make it cheaper to get. You know, whatever, who cares? I just think this is good. Good stuff here, all things considered. And they do have some other plans for Crimson Isle stuff, notably boss fight revamps. They want to make changes to reputation quest rewards. They want to do some dojo changes to make the experience smoother and make test of control slightly more lenient, and many other minor adjustments and bug fixes. However, they state here at the very bottom, and this is the kind of catch-22 with all of this. Quote, "We have a lot of amazing content planned for 2025. We won't explain what that is, by the way. So we may not be able to get back to the Crimson Isle for some time." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. What do you mean you're not going to be able to get back to the Crimson Isle for some time? You have a whole year. Does this mean, like, no other Crimson Isle updates till 2026? Like, that's the phrasing of this document. Like, what? Like, don't get me wrong. All of this stuff will be releasing within the next week or two, and that's, like, totally fine. But what do you mean? Like, we have a lot of amazing content planned for 2025. Tell us what it is. Overall, TLDR here is that they want to make things a little bit more balanced in terms of Crimson Armor. I think that the overall Crimson changes are fine. They are going to buff Crimson Swipe, or at least they're looking into it, and I think once they do that, it'll be completely and totally fine. Terror got buffed, and I think everyone's just happy about that. Kuudra made a little bit easier to do overall. Don't think anyone's upset about that. Aurora Armor got some pretty interesting changes. Once again, people are pretty happy with pretty much everything here. And all the other changes are fine. There's also on Soul Binding in this update, so who doesn't love that? I just hope that we get some sort of roadmap in the next little while, but we'll have to wait and see. Overall, if you want to leave your thoughts, feel free to head over to this forum post. It's linked down below. And make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, because it really does help out the channel a lot. At the end of the day, though, my name's Derailious. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end. And look to the future, fellas, because I will see you then.